Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another edition of News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International, broadcasting on the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Masbeg 105.6 FM, and audio streaming on www.alansar.org.za. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaba bikum. My name is Yunus Sacoor, and I will be in your company for the next 2 hours, 8 to 10 p.m. I will be interviewing our guests shortly. Today, the date is the 21st of May, 2025 and 23rd of Zulqa'dah, 1446 AH. Coincidentally, today was the National Budget 3.0. It is the third attempt to finalize the national budget, as well as the presidential visit to USA by President Ramaphosa. And we know just an hour ago, that particular meeting was broadcast live in a lot of our TV network stations. So we will do an analysis of the discussions that took place. I have a few guests in the studio with me this evening, and we'll be analyzing, the meeting and exactly what impact it has on South Africa, on the economy, etc. We know that, whether it's the coincidence of some positives coming out of the budget or the pausing of the tariff adjustments by President Trump and some other issues, that the markets have responded positively. The Rand is sitting below 18 Rand. Not long ago, it was 19 Rand. And also the equity markets have really shot up. So there's positive sentiment coming through. But today's historical visit of President Ramaphosa to the USA with Trump, and we know Trump is a bit of a character, and some critical issues came out. So we'll unpack that. With me in the studio, I have a political analyst, a former councillor, a politician, Samuel Kennedy. Sam, good evening and welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International.
Good evening, Yunus, and a nice warm evening. Greetings to the listeners, albeit in a very difficult climatic conditions, cold, windy. But thank you very much for the invite.
And we have two very important subjects we're discussing, the national budget and also this presidential working visit to USA. I'd also like to welcome Councillor Ernest Smith. He's a councillor in Ward 27. He represents the Democratic Alliance, and the leader of his party was also part of the delegation that met President Trump this evening, and he had some comments to make. Good evening, Ernest, and Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to News in Focus.
Wa alaikum salam. Jazakallah for having me again. I do love chatting and having all of these wonderful engagements with everybody.
Well, listen, News in Focus is about what's in focus. So there were two critical subjects that we discussing this evening, and we're going to analyze and consider exactly what impact it's going to have on South Africa. But before we discuss these subjects at length, let's have another break for another beautiful nasheed that our technician will play.
Ya Rasulallah, Ya Habiballah, Aka, 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 फिर के गली गली तबाह ठोकर सब्र की खाए क्यों دل کو جو عقل دے خدا تیری گلی سے جائے کیوں رخصت کا فدا کا شان ہمیں اٹھا دے خدا تیری گلی سے جائے کیوں یاد حضور کی قسم غفلت عیش ہے ستم یاد حضور کی قسم غفلت عیش ہے ستم خوب ہے قید غم میں ہم خوب ہے قید غم میں ہم کوئی ہمیں چھڑائے کیوں گلی جو نہ تھے تو کچھ نہ تھا وہ جو نہ ہو تو کچھ نہ ہو وہ جو نہ تھے تو کچھ نہ تھا وہ جو نہ ہو تو کچھ نہ ہو جان ہے وہ جہان کی جان ہے وہ جہان کی جان ہے تو جہان ہے دل کو جو عقل دے خدا تیری گلی سے جائے کیوں ہاں جان رہے عشق مصطفیٰ روز فضو کرے خدا جانے ہے عشق مصطفیٰ روز فضو کرے خدا جس کو عبید کا مزہ جس کو عبید کا مزہ گوا اٹھائے کیوں دل کو جو عقل دے خدا تیری گلی سے جائے کیوں ہے تو رضا نرالا जुर्म पे गए लजाए हम है तो रजा निराश तुम जुर्म पे गए लजाए हम कोई बचाए सौ से हम कोई बचाए सौ से गम साजे करब बजाए क्यों फिर
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to News in Focus live on Radio Al-Ansar International, broadcasting on the frequency W90.4 FM, Pinamar 105.6 FM, and streaming on www.alansar.org.za. Before the Nasheed break, we were chatting about the subjects we're discussing this evening. First, we're going to analyze Ramaphosa's presidential working visit to USA. Then we will chat about the national budget, and then we'll unpack the municipality's debt write-off. The guest this evening would be Hassan Mutala, economist and asset manager. He'll be joining us later in the program. Samuel Kennedy is live with us in the studio, and we have Councillor Ernest Smith. The show is interactive, and we welcome your comments, which can be sent to us on the studio WhatsApp number 06090410056. Now, about an hour ago, there was a live tele-broadcast of the meeting between Ramaphosa and President Trump. A lot of critics are saying that Ramaphosa's US visit is sparking an outrage, a trip organized by white capital. So they're saying that the visit to the United States has ignited a political firestorm in South Africa, with critics accusing him of compromising national sovereignty under pressure from US President Donald Trump and tech billionaire Elon Musk. Ramaphosa met Trump yesterday, as a matter of fact, at his office, also called the Oval Office. What was framed by the presidency as a diplomatic mission to reset the strategic relationship between South Africa and the US is now being described by many as an ill-advised tour orchestrated by powerful white capital interests. Chief among them, Musk and South African billionaire Johan Rupert both were there at the meeting this evening. At the center of the controversy is the potential entry of Musk's Starlink satellite internet service into South African market. Sources suggest that Ramaphosa is preparing to greenlight the move, potentially circumventing black economic empowerment legislation, which requires at least 30% local ownership by historically disadvantaged communities. And this heightened tensions, Trump has openly attacked South Africa's land reform policies, alleging that white farmers were being violently dispossessed, a claim that has been widely debunked as part of the global disinformation campaign. Adding to tensions is South Africa's case against Israel, wherein the International Court of Justice found that Israel was guilty of genocide in Gaza. This was cowardice, said one political commentator in Johannesburg. He mentioned that Cyril going to the Oval Office like that, after everything Trump and Musk have said about South Africa, they know there's no white genocide. They're using that lie to punish us for holding Netanyahu accountable at the ICJ. If they can treat a NATO-backed presidential like Zelensky with disdain, what hope does Ramaphosa have? So this evening there was this live tele broadcast, and in that broadcast, Trump played some, footage on Julius Malema's meeting, his public meeting at a stadium, wherein it is indicated that a large number of people attended, some 100,000, and they played the portion where he said, "Kill the Boer," and deal with the white farmers, etc. Analysts have indicated that 72% of the farmers in South Africa are white, and there's concern expressed that if these white farmers are driven out of the country, it will have a serious impact on the economy, because agriculture plays a very important part in the economy. Whether Trump was teasing Ramaphosa by playing these, the footage of what happened and selected that particular footage, Ramaphosa responded and indicated that these are the opposition sectors, of the political parties, and Malema being one. So many of us listened to the interview or the meeting that took place together with some of the questions that came from the media and some analysis thereafter. Now, what we're going to discuss this evening is, let's analyze what good this trip has made or it's going to continue to make to improve the setup in South Africa. And some of the issues that were raised by some of those present was they want South Africa to start, improving its relationship with the different race groups, particularly the minorities, because there is a concern that the ANC has been in power for some 30 years, and this black economic empowerment and affirmative action, is there room for this to continue? And in 30 years, there's been no improvement. So some of the questions that are being raised by other parts of the world is that why don't you let South Africa grow and enable those that can make changes in South Africa to continue play a part? For example, a lot of professionals, medical doctors, etc., find themselves unemployed in South Africa. And there was a lot of emphasis on the high degree of unemployment in South Africa, some 33%. And the next highest is under 10% in other parts of the world. So South Africa's got a huge crisis. Further, there's a lot of corruption, maladministration. But there's also killings, not only of white farmers, but other people. So criminality, security problems are on the increase. But there was a lot of concern raised about the current administration, to which Ramaphosa and John Steenhuisen responded. And they've indicated now that the GNU has been formed, they're looking at ways and means of dealing with corruption, maladministration, improving the economy, ensuring that the unemployment is being dealt with. Job creation becomes an important part in the economy of South Africa, and at the same time, the encouraging tourism into the country, economic development, etc. So, uh, Ramaphosa and John Steenhuisen and the others were of the view that this is a step in the right direction, and they showed Trump that, listen, you give us your support as the U.S. Forget about all these various tariffs that you're trying to impose, and the issue of AGOA, relook at your decision there, and the aid you're giving to South Africa. So it was a kind of like a bilateral relationship of sort to build up a good business relationship and relationship with the US and Europe as well. So against that backdrop, you have a situation where some of the internal politicians are saying, has Ramaphosa sold South Africa? And many are saying no, others are saying yes. Now, this whole issue about white capitalism, etc., pre-apartheid, as Erniel said in his report, that two wrongs cannot make a right. So we must just deal with all the best practices and make sure South Africa starts using the word flourishing. So I want to bring in Sam Kennedy. He's a political analyst. He listened to the speech. He read the article. Sam, we obviously have a lot of reliance on the US. Our currency is based on the US dollar. And about a month ago, the dollar passed $19. But with the kind of pausing that USA has made on tariffs and other things, the currency increased, and then equity markets lost 20%. About a month ago, they've regained more than that, and they're sitting at much more. The JSE All Share Index was dropped to below 80,000, and it's sitting at 94,000 as we speak. So there is positive sentiment worldwide. So perhaps you just want to comment briefly on whether you agree with the critics in South Africa that Ramaphosa now, has basically fallen for this trap. That's the first question. And secondly, how do you foresee the impact of this trip together with key businessmen and other dignitaries having an impact on the economy in South Africa?
Thanks, Yunus. Let me say from the beginning. So I'm going to put a very impartial hat on. An impartial hat is basically look at all the aspects as opposed to being partial. So one, Cyril Ramaphosa has attempted, nice word, he's attempted to portray a government that is leaking as a united front. And by doing so, he was accompanied by the richest man in South Africa, Mr. Johan Rupert, and he was accompanied by any else who is a very close golfing friend, not political friend, of President Donald J. Trump. So, the first side of the coin is that Ramaphosa took the right approach. And as a statesman, you cannot take an ANC approach because you're representing all South Africans. So in that regard, he has to be commended. Taking Johan Rupert has its pitfalls because the majority of the people in this country are very, well, firstly, they're Black African. Secondly, they're looking for equity. Thirdly, they see Johan Rupert, whether we agree or disagree, but that's the way they see it, as a beneficiary of the previous regime, right? So they have all those aspects to it. But the bottom line is that Cyril Ramaphosa has done what a lot of people don't have the guts to do. He's gone into the lion's den. I think I listened to Johan Rupert. I think Johan Rupert came out extremely very well. But here's the issue, which Trump will be sitting pondering on. Now, you got to remember that Donald Trump has a history of very strong Black relations in the U.S. The Democrats hate him because he's pulled quite a big chunk of the Black and Hispanic and Latino and the South Indian, well, and the Indian or the Asian and the Palestinians and the Muslim. He's pulled them all away from the Democrats. Donald Trump knows the history of South Africa. The history of South Africa is that we come from a period that was fraught with oppression, or what we call racial segregation and racial subjugation. A lot of people say 30 years and nothing's changed. No, a lot has changed. But the irony that's changed is that dark-skinned minorities are now getting the whoop by the African majority. And America sees that. How do we see that? All 70% of all votes that the Democratic Alliance gets, and they get the chunk. Whether it's Action SA, you can say all the other little smaller nyana ones. The Democratic Alliance gets the chunk of the dark-skinned minorities, which is those of mixed race and those of Indian origin. And that cannot be debatable because facts speak for themselves. The ANC has adopted a very skewed theory. The skewed theory is that the original definition of Black economic empowerment is no longer being applied. What is being applied now is bashing of non-whites, minorities, in particular those of Indian and colored or mixed race descent. Because in this province particularly, you go to any government department, minorities are ostracized, pushed aside, treated like rubbish. Nobody's got the guts to talk up for them. We've got people sitting in the ANC, minorities, dark-skinned minorities. They don't have the backbone or the wherewithal to stand up. So, coming back to Donald Trump, I think he played them. I don't think anything's going to change. I think South Africa has to deal with its issues. Let me tell you what the issue is. This is the rub. The issue is until the Black African embraces racial equity. You know what racial equity is? Where we treat each other with respect, with tolerance, political tolerance in particular, and where we don't bash minorities, dark-skinned minorities, economically. Like, for example, in eThekwini municipality, in Umsunduzi municipality, in Duguza municipality, in Ugu, I'm talking about the big municipalities, in city of Joburg, all big tenders, millions, hundreds of millions, billions, are all going to Black Africans for the right reasons. I'm not saying for the wrong reasons, but it shouldn't be at the expense of. And so Donald Trump is putting that into the spotlight, that you can talk about all the stuff that Cape Town's got the highest crime rate, which Johan Rupert made a fool of himself, in my opinion, because you shouldn't be going there and telling other people how bad your country is. I mean, he tried to make John a fool, but made himself a fool. Now, when you go into the lion's den, like the Oval Office, you go in there united, you go in there to talk about how best do we do trade, because that's what South Africa relies on, trade. We need trade. We can't go there and be talking about Julius Malema. Julius Malema's party is a receding party, it's a regressing party, and it's never gone beyond 10%. So we should be saying, what do we do? And the GNU, well, it's not a GNU, it's a coalition. This coalition has been there. Next week will be exactly 1 year. And we can't even sort a budget out. We can't even sort out the economic crisis. We can't even sort out basics. And like I said to my brother Ernest, this is John Steenhuisen's conundrum. I served with him in council. I know him. We had our bashes and so forth, and you know you were there. John is a very good opposition leader. All his years in Durban City Council, he was leader of the DA. In KZN Parliament, he was leader of the DA. And up until Musi Maimane, he was chief whip, and so it goes. He's trying to carry two hats. And here's the conundrum with John. One, he's now become a beneficiary of being a big stomach. Okay? He spent all his time sitting, eating, sitting and talking in meetings all day. And John was never like that. So from an image point of view, I'm not portraying him as a bad person. I'm saying it's locking him down because he's got the ability to do better than that, to keep government on its toes. Because he's got this ministry, he's no longer, you can see the DA is weak because that's the way the ANC wants to neutralize him. So there's no opposition. To talk about MK is not, no disrespect, they're not even, whatever you want to call it, an opposition, right? The only thing they talk about is, one is Jacob Zuma, for the right reasons, and two, they got a gripe against the ANC, but they don't come with not one practical solution of South Africa, and that's what we need. We need economic growth. We need to get our people working, and that's what Donald Trump is interested in. Lastly, I listened to Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz, today, talk about South Africa. The issue is not the ICJ. ICJ is but one issue. Ted Cruz says, and he's what they call the Right Honorable high-ranking senator. It's one of the most high-ranking. Under President Ramaphosa, and Rupert he doesn't even know, he hasn't got a clue. The ANC government over the last 10 years has voted against the Americans for the last 10 years. That's a fact. It's nothing to do with ICJ. It's nothing to do with crime on the Cape Flats. It's nothing to do with the GNU. It's nothing to do with X, Y, and Z. It's to do with the strategy of the ANC going east as opposed to taking the Thabo Mbeki, Nelson Mandela line, which was a lot of rhetoric, but in practice, it was what was good for the country. And that is what has come back and put the ANC. Lastly and finally, I see the ANC and I'm now putting a very simple commentator hat on, I see the ANC moving closer to the DA, part of the ANC. Not all, part of. I see the ANC moving to the DA. The DA will become what we call, the DA is formerly an NNP, but nonetheless, they'll become a very good middle of the road. And the left, or the rest, is what they call the progressives at the moment. You'll see the other side of the ANC, which is Paul Mashatile. You'll see the radicals, Radical Economic Transformation, MK Party, EFF, ATM, and so forth. And that's good for South Africa. The only problem is that is the majority, right? That constitutes a majority. And so we'll end up in the middle of nowhere. So to the political players, we want to say to them, the only way to change the direction and the impetus of this country is forget about politics. We've got to sit and do what's right, not what's political party partiality. Do what Cyril did. But Cyril is going to fall on his sword because that's the worst mistake he made for his party. I thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Sam has given us an analysis of the meeting of Ramaphosa and his allies with Trump and some of the implications thereof. We'll take a break, and after the break, we'll bring in Councillor Ernest Smith to give us his views on what happened today and yesterday.
You're on the long one.
Radio Al-Ansar, 24/7, 365.
Welcome to Simplex Radio. Visit our showroom for the full range of car audio. Our TV department carries top brands with quality LED panels, full HD to Ultra HD, and now the experience of Super Ultra HD. Visit our theater rooms and transform your home with brands like Onkyo, Integra, Denon, Boston Acoustics, Yamaha, and more for quality audio visual experience. Now available, full range of home appliances. A one-stop shopping experience. Call 031 306 4029 or Kenilworth Park, 202 Brickfield Road, Overport. Simplex Radio, the name you can trust.
Butterlicious, butterlicious, butterlicious. When the food melts in my mouth, so does my heart. Blended by our expert chefs with pure cotton seed oil. Divine lasts longer, so cook more with Divine. Divine makes every meal a special treat. It is Butterlicious. Approved as part of the Heart and Stroke Foundation Eating Plan, Cotton Mark SA, and a proudly South African product. Divine Cooking Oil. Butterlicious.
This Eid al-Adha, remember the ultimate sacrifice and your duty to humanity. Join the Al-Ansar outreach in reaching over 70 villages in Malawi. For just 1,200 rand, your Qurbani is slaughtered, cleaned and distributed under the supervision of our respected Mufti. Make your Qurbani count. Call Al-Ansar outreach today, 031 208 1601.
Education, health, dignity, empowerment. These wishes all begin with water. Africa Muslims Agency is committed to providing clean water to the thousands who still live without this basic human right. Support us in giving the best of charities. Provide a water well for 16,500 rand or a borehole for 55,000 rand in Afghanistan or 65,000 rand in Africa. Gain Thawabi Jariyah and help communities to reach their full potential. Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Radio Al-Ansar, 24/7, 365.
Ya Rasool Allah, Ya Habib Allah, Aka, 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 फिर के गली गली तबाह हो करे सब्र की खाए क्यों दिल को जो अक्ल दे खुदा तेरी गली से जाए क्यों रुखसात का फिदा कशान गश से हमें उठाए क्यों रुखसात काफिला कशान गश से हमें उठाए क्यों सोते हैं उनके साए में सोते हैं उनके साथ कोई हमें जगाए क्यों फिर दिल को जो अक्ल दे
Let's start. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to News in Focus live on Radio Al-Ansar International, broadcasting on the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Marisburg 105.6, and streaming on www.alansar.org.za. Before the break, we were chatting with Samuel Kennedy, and he gave us an analysis of exactly how he sees the visit of President Ramaphosa to USA having an impact with South Africa. But he went on further to discuss exactly how the political scenario may end up going forward into South Africa. Now, I'd like to hear another politician's view on the visit and also exactly how he foresees the situation. Councillor Ernest Smith, good evening and welcome to News in Focus.
Assalamu alaikum to the residents and listeners of the station, and thank you for having me on. I think, Sam and myself are just having the conversation of how we share a mind and of how often our thoughts overlap. But I think, in essence, I just want to take us back a little bit because I fundamentally think that politicians have a tendency of shooting themselves in their foot. And when there are international repercussions, suddenly we ask ourselves why. But having said that, I think with Trump involving himself in our local affairs, as it were, especially with the focus around the farm murders, I want to agree to a point, and I say this with Sam because what we are fundamentally seeing, what is fed into this whole narrative, is essentially the lack of services to the people. That is the primary reason for this whole barrage and consequence that have come up. Because the reality is, back between when democracy came, from then till I think it was about 2006, correct me, Sam, when we still had our policing units, all right, that were I think they were called the commandos that were disbanded. Their specific aim was aimed at protecting our farmers and therefore the food supply in our country. It was a poor political move for the ANC to disband them. And I think it was under Thabo Mbeki, if I'm not mistaken. And that choice has led to the, I'm not going to label it a racist agenda because the reality there are farmers across every racial demographic. But I think what has fundamentally led to the breakdown of services is not only a specialized policing force that deals with that, but also poverty and the increase in crime and the stagnant approach that our economy has had over the last decade, because we have a lot of unemployed people who will believe whatever Mickey Mouse politician stands up there, like Julius Malema, and I'm going to call him that because why would you purposefully sow division on a racist point of view? If I went up there and created a song as a politician and said, let's shoot this one and that one and the next best pop, I would be taken and hauled off to constitutional court, and I would probably be found guilty because now it's not against a white person. So we need to balance that narrative because there are farmers across the board. And I still remember when Chris Papas, mayor of Mgeni, was actually doing engagements with farmers in and around the province at, I think, 2 years ago, there were people of all races that had suffered brutal, and when I say brutal, I don't want to go into the specifics of it, but you I think the listeners can understand where it is, but there were brutal incidents, and these happened to black farmers, these happened to white farmers, these happened to Indian and colored farmers, and the reality there is this false narrative that is perpetuated that because you now have some sort of farming enterprise, you have millions, let's use Ramaphosa's analogy here, that you have millions put in your couch. And unfortunately, couple that with unemployment, couple that with like people spewing falsehoods, you're going to get that result. What I think is problematic is that, yes, while there are a lot of white farmers, unfortunately, you're going to get, when it comes to crime, you're going to get a disproportionate amount of attention. The reality of farming in this country, and is its a historic aspect, is yes, there are still a lot of white farmers, and it's slowly being addressed, but it's not at the pace that it should be at. And please don't get me wrong when I'm saying that I'm calling for mass expropriation, because I'm not, because I'm dead against taking a person's land without what's the word? Compensation. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. I think the engagement, and this is where Trump and I think Musk and the like have also capitalized on the growing fears, because ultimately, if you take away the racial element of it, they are raising an issue which has long been raised at a national level, to say people are being murdered, irrespective of race groups. What is your government, because SAPS is a national entity, doing to deal with it? Because they are drastically understaffed and under budgeted, and for the last 4 consecutive years they've had their budget slashed, not increased. So I think the world capital was that the standard was 380 residents to 1 cop, whereas we are sitting in the 400, 500 region. So we are drastically understaffed. So all of this is obviously perpetuated and come out in another country, and I think people are pushing whatever agendas they are pushing, quite frankly. But Ramaphosa has definitely shot himself in the foot, because when you go and approach an international audience, you cannot take your party politics, because now you're in the international stage. You're not in South Africa. But he's definitely going to suffer for his stance. And I think with his engagements with Trump, obviously he tried to keep a level head as best as he could. And obviously he tried to keep on pushing the aspect, we want to take it from trade. We want to reestablish our trade, and actually, be on par and mend those relationships. But the ANC has not done any justice to itself over the last 10, 15 years with that, because of the lack of service delivery that they've put out. And it doesn't help that our people are suffering and running abroad, and we're crying to international audiences saying this is the problem. But I fundamentally think that we have to mend our relationships with our international trade partners, because if we look at the amount of investment the US, and just primarily from an economic perspective, if you look at the 600 odd companies that the US has and 200,000 jobs which they have actively created in the country, we cannot afford to jeopardize 200,000 people, if I'm not mistaken, livelihood because of politicians arguing and bickering. And I would say that would not help us at all. But if you look at the investment, there's a good couple of billion that they've pumped in over the last couple of years. And the reality is we as a country also have to look and balance our trade partners across the globe, as what's been happening, where we're establishing, I think it was Cambodia or the like, where we started exporting our apples to, and started creating 2,500 jobs and the rest of it. And those are the things we should be doing. Our market and our economy needs to flourish, and we cannot with BEE, and that's where the next point was leading me to. BEE was necessary to a point. All right, it was necessary to a point. The problem was that BEE has become a gravy train method. Anybody who's connected to somebody in politics and gives them a backhand, like the tender processes and stuff, and you pay somebody exorbitant amount of money, and that's why a lot of these tenders are exorbitant in nature, because of the 10 or 15 people that you have to pay off along the way in order for you just to at least carry on and make peanuts versus what you could have made. So BEE has now been I want to use the word capitalized for those who want to enrich themselves and their cronies. That's what that process, it's been hijacked. BEE is actually, and it's taken us back, because now if you look at the amount of racial-based laws we have gone back to. And I say gone back, meaning that the ANC is created and it's only benefiting the ANC and its comrades. And obviously a spin-off of the MK because people are pretending to be ANC and the like. But the reality is that is no longer a boosting mechanism for people. And it was meant for low-income, woman-headed households and people in rural areas, and it was meant to open up the economy to them.
Ernest, we got 2 minutes to the news break, and I'm just going to make a few comments. I'm gonna set a few questions which you guys can respond after the news break because we got 2 minutes left. I'm just going to make a few comments, and I want you guys to note it so that we can do a comparison on pre-apartheid, post-apartheid, and compare ourselves with a few other neighboring countries. The first question I want to raise, and think about it: who is funding the EFF? Who is funding MK? Who is funding the DA? Who is funding the ANC? Those are the bigger parties. That's the first question. Secondly, Rhodesia, now known as Zimbabwe, there was land grabs and the farmers were forced out. What happened to them? Just keep that in mind. In South Africa, 72% of the farmers are white Afrikaners, and they chose to stick around. Why? A small minority of 49 when they were car guards, etc. But Trump knows exactly what's happening. The economic activities during Mandela and Mbeki's reign, consider what was the economy then, the value of the rand relative to the declination now. South Africa is rich in minerals, if you look at gold, coal, platinum, and various other minerals, they're very rich. And as Sam mentioned, Johan Rupert is one of, together with Oppenheimer, the main guys that are still holding on to the mines. The West needs that. America imports a lot. China imports coal in South Africa. So it's of economic value to other parts of the world. And then if you look at our sporting, activity, South Africa won the Rugby World Cup twice, and they're still a powerful rugby nation. They also won the Afro Cup or whatever, Africa Cup of Nations from a soccer perspective. In terms of golfing, we had one of the finest golfers in the world. We've got one of the finest swimmers in the world. We've got a really powerful cricket side. On the sporting fraternity, South Africa is excelling. Obviously, because of democracy, there had to be changes in the country. And this is why we're alluding to the fact that during the reign of Zuma, there's been a gradual decline, and now it's become even worse. With MK are basically those that are disgruntled from the former ANC have formed MK. Now, indications are that these were the culprits that were implicated in the Zondo Commission report that swung across the other side. So keep all those factors in mind. But the most important factor is the good climate that South Africa has. And basically, we export a lot of agriculture, a lot of fruit, etc. And we import from China mostly. So the currency does affect us. So when we continue our discussion after the news break, we're going to sharp focus on some of the comments I made. I just want responses from you guys. We're also going to chat about the municipal debt write-off, which affects our communities and how it works, Ernest. And last but not least, is we're going to do an analysis of Budget 3.0, exactly what are the implications. So we'll take a news break, and the next hour we'll continue with these interesting discussions.
Audio stream across the world on radioalansar.co.za.
Radio Alansar, 24/7, 365.
An informative Islamic global perspective. This is Alansar News.
Making news this hour, the 21st of May, the news from Durban, 90.4 FM, Pietermaritzburg, 105.6 FM. KwaZulu-Natal community near Ulundi lives in fear of stray elephants. American Money Now. Local media says the community of Egudubegeni in Kwaqeza near Ulundi has approached the National Parliament to intervene in removing stray elephants which are now threatening the lives and property of residents there. The elephants are believed to be members of an original herd of about 30 roaming elephants which escaped from a private game reserve. Report says the residents of the area Egudubegeni community now live in constant fear. They say they cannot grow crops anymore and their children cannot go to school when the elephants are around. As such, they are virtually under curfew. The Portfolio Committee on Environment has ordered the Provincial Wildlife Authority to find an urgent solution to the problem. The Zimvelo Wildlife Authority says it is currently fencing off an area for the elephants. It has been ordered to report back to Parliament in July. More news. In the unprecedented situation of having to draft 3 budgets for a single financial year, Finance Minister Gordon Duana may have just succeeded today in winning over the Government of National Unity's second biggest party, that's according to local media. Tabling the third of the budget 2025 in Parliament today, Gordon Duana says that the budget is an attempt to meet shared goals of redistribution, redress, and structural transformation. In response, the DA Democratic Alliance, which took the minister to court last month over the proposed VAT increase, says Gordon Duana has delivered a national budget this time that could receive its backing when it comes down to the votes. However, the ACDP in Parliament has this to say.
Well, firstly, we are disappointed at the decrease in economic growth down to 1.4%. And that does not bode well for job creation and for revenue collection. So we have to do more for economic growth. However, we are pleased there's no VAT increase, there's no personal income tax increase at this stage or company tax.
Staying with that story, MK Party and controversies with Des Van Rooyen says that they are disappointed with the budget.
I've been listening to it's more of a fireplace story. Lies, fictions, camouflaged in big English and financial terms. There's no budget speech that was presented here. The result of the matter is that our majority of our people in South Africa will continue to carry the burden of our fiscal strategy. Because as you might have noted, VAT is no longer there, but what is there in place of VAT? Fuel, diesel, and petrol, respectively, will be increasing. But besides that, we are reducing on VAT-zero-rated items.
Back here in KwaZulu-Natal, the KwaZulu-Natal Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs says it has systems in place to respond to any incidents following a weather warning of damaging winds in part of the province. The Weather Service issued the warning as a cold front moves across the regions in the country. KwaZulu-Natal has experienced severe weather events in recent years, including wildfires and snowstorms, which resulted in fatalities and the displacement of residents. Department spokesperson Senzelo Mzila says the province has learned from the past incidents and are working closely with stakeholders. Finally, international story. Foreign Minister Abbas Agrachi says Iran is considering whether to participate in the next round of indirect nuclear negotiations with the U.S. Agrachi earlier today says that the Iranian delegation is reviewing the proposed time and venue of the 5th round of talks, even as he emphasizes the country's resolve to confront excessive U.S. demands. Agrachi's remarks comes after the U.S. reports says that the next round of talks is expected to take place at the weekend in Rome. Contradictory statement by U.S. officials, including the demand for zero enrichment by Iran, has left the fate of negotiations in limbo. Agrachi says that Tehran has previously responded to unreasonable requests by the U.S., saying Iran will by no means halt its uranium enrichment program. The weather tonight, it's 21 degrees. A quick reminder of our top story. The community of Egudubegeni in Kwanteza, Nyaulundi, has approached the National Parliament to intervene in removing stray elephants, which is now threatening the lives and property of residents around that area. That's the news.
Radio Al-Ansar, 24/7, 365.
This segment is brought to you by Kenfield Auto, your RMI approved service and repair specialist. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport.
Kenfield Auto. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب.
Car won't start?
Can feel auto.
Noisy brakes?
Can feel auto.
Due for a service?
Can feel auto. Can feel auto. The answer to all your car problems. Your service and repair specialist for your VW, Audi, Suzuki, Toyota, or just about any vehicle. Kenfield Auto, your RMI and insurance approved workshop to handle them all. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport. Call us on 031 207 2399. Kenfield Auto.
لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك.
This weekend, join the Radio Al-Ansar team at the Magma Agri Fair. 2 days of non-stop fun and entertainment. We're talking live cattle auctions, amazing shopping, mouth-watering food, and tons of fun for the kids. It's a weekend you don't want to miss out. So come on down and join us live from Camperdown at the Magma Agri Fair, May 24th and 25th. See you there.
Radio Al-Ansar, 24/7, 365.
Listen to News in Focus on Radio Al-Ansar, Durban 90.4 and Pietermaritzburg 105.6 FM every Wednesday from 8 p.m. with Yunus Sacoor. That's 8 p.m. every Wednesday, Radio Al-Ansar, keeping you informed.
Once upon a time, during our moonbeam, a merciful mankind was sent for you and me.
And this orphan child grew and came to be the greatest man alive. Praying Jannah with me, paved the way for us so we can believe. Taught us all about love, showed us what it means. Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad, بحنانك قلبي تبسم. Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad, so radiant. Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad, to see your
خير الأنبياء إني مشتاق لأحبابي من بعد
فما يرضيك حبيبي محمد أنت من صلى عليك وسلم. أمتي أمتي أدخلها معي، أمتي أمتي في الجنة نلتقي. يا محمد يا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. بحنانك قلبي تبسم. يا محمد يا محمد so radiant. يا محمد يا محمد tell the world to see your face. يا محمد يا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. يا محمد يا محمد بحنانك قلبي تبسم. يا محمد يا محمد so radiant. يا محمد يا محمد tell the world to see your face.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to News in Focus live on Radio Al-Ansar International, broadcasting on the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Pienberg 105.6 FM, audio streaming on www.alansar.org.za. Before the news break, we had a robust discussion on basically the Ramaphosa's presidential working visit to USA, some comments from our analyst Samuel Kennedy and Ernest. They tackled the issue from different angles, but I asked a few important questions and made some comments before the news break, which I'm sure they noted and they will be commenting on. But before they come in, I'd like to welcome Hassan Mutala, economist, asset manager on the studio. Hassan, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al-Ansar International.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Hassan, South Africans awaited for this crucial budget announcement amid economic crises. With unemployment at a staggering 32.9%, approximately 33%, sluggish economic growth and rising living costs, South Africans are facing intense financial pressure, as they heard Finance Minister Enoch Godonwana's budget speech today. This was the minister's third attempt to pass a budget after previous proposals, including controversial VAT increase. Basically, there was political and public outrage. Citizens and economists alike, they were hopeful that they'll get some relief amid growing economic hardship. Now, some critics have indicated that the economic growth as a result of the budget is just 1.4%, which is disappointing. Obviously, there's no VAT increases, but the impact of the petrol levy, which has gone up by 16 cents, people are questioning what revenue will this bring in, but is this another form of tax? So perhaps if you can just give us some of the highlights, positive and negative, of the third attempt of Budget 3.0.
Sure. Obviously, this is Budget 3.0. The key focus was to try and address the issue of not having a VAT increase. And that he had to, obviously, after the pressure that was put on him over the last two budgets, that has now been completely taken off the table. For this budget, although the minister did state that next year he's looking for certain tax increases. Where it'll come from, we're still not certain, but they're talking about that. But in this budget in particular, basically it's your sin taxes and the likes of the fuel levy that has come in to help with try and fill in some of the shortfall. So, for example, we talked about the fuel levy, 15 to 16 cents, depending whether it's petrol or diesel. That's going to bring in about 3.5 to 4 billion rand per year. So that is plugging in slightly in terms of the shortfall, but it's as I said, bringing in a small amount towards the revenue side. The one other area, and on the sin taxes, and this is it is a relatively easy way to get it. It's an indirect tax, but it's an easy way. It's a consumption-based tax, and it's an area which I think there's not much outcry in terms of when you're increasing that area. So alcohol in particular increased by 6.8%, which I think is good. And I think government should continue on that path, where on a year-on-year basis continue to increase above inflation in that area, because alcohol, if you look at the impact in terms of the negative impact on society that it's had and continues to have, I think it's also a potential hindrance in terms of consumption. So I think that's one area which they've touched on. The other is tobacco. Now, you remember tobacco is an area which has been focused on for a number of years. And I think in this case, they've increased it by 4.75%. So again, an area which is to try and prevent and discourage, but look, at the same time, it is a revenue generator for the fiscus, and I think that brings in a bit more, brings in some revenues on that end as well. The one key area, though, which is obviously from a personal income taxes, which government has basically sort of collecting, or is expected to collect some revenue, is by what they call is a bracket creep. So what that means is that there's no inflationary adjustment on your personal income taxes. So for example, your year on year, your salary may increase by 5% or 6%, but you're still going to stay in the same tax brackets as it was last year. Historically, what happens, government tries to take take into account inflation, and they sort of move the brackets up a bit by inflation. This case, they're not doing it. So I think in that case, government will be picking in close to 15 billion rands in terms of revenue because of the inflation or bracket creep that will take place in that area. From a government fiscal stability, the key issue remains and continues to be an issue is that we have not addressed the issue around spending adequately. And with the result, we're still sitting with a budget deficit of 4.6%, but more importantly, the debt to GDP is expected to be 77% for the year ahead. That's a big number. It's still indicating that 22 cents of every rand that we're earning is going towards debt servicing costs. To put that into perspective, our debt servicing cost expected number for the year ahead is 424 billion rands. That's a lot more than R1 billion per day that South Africa has to pay just to service its debt. That's a big amount of money. And the debt, if you look at the expectation over the next 3 years, the debt to GDP is not expected to change much. It's still expected to remain around the 77% mark to GDP over the next 3 years. That remains a concern. And I think the problem is that they have not addressed still the core issue around a bloated cabinet. And the fact is that you need to address irregular spending, which remains still a substantial amount across government sectors. And that is a key issue. And I think hopefully, well, I don't think it's not going to happen in this year, but hopefully this year we may see some reduction. We're hoping some reduction in terms of irregular expenditure. But, if you yesterday there was an article that came out in Daily Maverick around the water mafia and how they've just continued to grow in momentum. And the fact is that irregular expenditure that is being shown by the municipalities and the fact that these guys are still creeping in and making headroads both in Gauteng and KZN means that they're taking a bigger part of the pie and part of that irregular expenditure that we're spending. So the key issue is this here is that expenditure remains a challenge, and it's a big part of the budget, and it's leading towards still higher debt to GDP over the next 3 years. We're hoping that our economy grows faster than expected. That will help. And then the second area is that the tax revenue collection. Now, the SARS has been incentivized to try and generate a lot more. I think they're looking at they're having to plug in at least 20 billion for the year ahead in terms of additional revenues that they need to find. And with the some additional resource, not as much as what they were anticipating, some additional resources is being given to SARS to try and generate the revenue. So they are going after some of the unpaid taxes and illicit revenues, and those are the probably areas where they're trying to generate the revenue. But the key focus, I think, is that my concern still remains around the debt to GDP and the fact that the core issue around expenditure and more sort of importantly, if expenditure was used more effectively, like, in core services, whether it's policing, healthcare, doctors, things like that, where those services are really, really needed, focus on that, rather than a lot more around admin-related and bloated public sectors. That should be more core focus area in terms of our expenditure, as well as infrastructure spending. That remains a huge challenge still for us.
Hassan, I've noted in the last couple of weeks that the rand, was a month ago over 19 rand because of the tariff adjustments that Trump was talking about, and he paused it. And then there was a reaction after the pause, and currently the rand is sitting at 17.90, approximately a rand better off. And also the all-share index, that's an indication of the economy, dropped by 20%, but has now gone beyond the 88,000 mark, which is now around 94,000. What was the reason for markets reacting in this fashion?
Sure. So obviously with the with the announcements by Trump around tariffs during that period, markets came under pressure. And it was not only a South African issue, it was a global issue. So if you look at both major global developed markets and also major global emerging markets, like our major emerging markets, be it China, India, Turkey, Brazil, those places, there were major fallouts in terms of their equity markets and to some extent their bond markets. Their currencies among major emerging markets also came under pressure. So again, highlighting that not a purely South African issue, it was an issue that was experienced across the globe. Now, as some of those tariff fears are being eased, you can see in the last few weeks, while Trump had come out and he came out very boldly and aggressively around those tariffs, there has been some stepping back over the last few weeks, deals being announced. For example, China and US have now cutting back tariffs quite drastically from what they were announced a few weeks back. And you're seeing also further trade deals being announced with many other countries between the US and other countries across the globe as well. So with the result, market fears have started to sort of allay. And you've seen global equity markets moving up quite strongly over the last few weeks. South Africa, similarly, we saw our all-share index moving up quite strongly. The rand has benefited from that improving sentiment, but where it was more a weakening of the dollar. One key issue is that the US bond yields had picked up and remains relatively high. Last week, one of the rating agencies downgraded the US, still a highly rated in terms of investment rating, but the fact is, it was an important point to make that the US got downgraded. And the key issue was that their debt levels are spiraling because they're printing money, and there was concern around inflationary pressures going forward, and that's a key concern. So with the result, before bond yields have picked up in the US dollar has weakened against major currencies across the globe, including emerging currencies South Africa. So we've seen South African rand strengthening, but also other emerging market currencies also strengthening as well. So I think there's been some positive domestic news coming through, but it's mainly the fact that you've seen the global it's dynamics play out, where you've seen improvement in terms of tariff fears, and secondly, you've seen trade deals being done over the last couple of weeks, and at the same time, still some concern around the US and the fact that US bond yields have picked up over the period as well.
Now, just a few comments on the budget speech. The DA spokesperson, Kerabo Kako, I think you know him, Ernest Smith, engaged with media, and he indicated the 2025 budget speech. He outlined the DA's expectation. He said the DA continues putting the people of SA first by focusing on economic growth and jobs. 1 trillion will now be spent on infrastructure like roads, bridges, water supply, dams, and public transport over the next 3 years. These will improve basic service delivery and create more jobs for struggling South Africans. The Rescue SA mission continues. Further, it says that cutting government waste for better delivery, the DA's long-standing proposal to shut down low-priority projects, inefficient spending, and low-output programs will now be implemented as announced by the Minister of Finance. Basically, the DA was not prepared to get behind the budget that maintained unsustainable government expenditure on the back of raising VAT, making struggling citizens pay for inefficiencies and waste in government. But today's version has gone some way to undo this. So obviously, the DA, together with the GNU, is looking at ways and means of curtailing wasteful, irregular expenditure, dealing with corruption and the consequences thereof, as well as ensuring that the monies that is generated is used for the benefit of the people. Now, coming back to the water mafia, the so-called water mafia has grown significantly in South Africa over the past few years. This is your favorite subject, Sam. With it disrupting supply and wastewater facilities to gain contracts with municipalities to provide water and other services at inflated prices. Now, as other parts of the country experience water outages or shortages, the mafia stepped in to take the opportunity to expand their operations in Gauteng in particular. The mafia has spread to the extent that it has generated garnered the attention of President Ramaphosa, who who told the National Water and Sanitation in Daba earlier this year that criminal syndicates have infiltrated parts of the water supply in South Africa. The mafia has begun to deliberately disrupt water supply to win contracts with municipalities and has begun branching into wastewater treatment works. They've exploited existing forms of corruption within the government. They say that the mafias are particularly prominent in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, with these provinces experiencing sporadic water outages on which the mafia thrives. Coincidentally, MK are the kingpins in these provinces. In particular, Gauteng, with its 3 major metros, they have seen water resources come under increasing pressure from population growth and severe delays in the construction of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project. As a result, the province has become increasingly reliant on water tankers over the past few years, spending over 2 billion on private tanker contracts in the past 5 years. 2 billion. Yep. The city of Durban, your favorite city, Ernest and Sam, has proven to be particularly vulnerable to the exploitation from the water mafia, with rapid urbanization and failing infrastructure pushing communities to rely on private tankers. They say a ground-up investigation found that in Adams Mission, you know this area, Ernest, a town of eThekwini, nearly every resident interviewed had purchased water sold illegally by tanker mafias. Mafias will illegally charge residents up to 15 times the city set rates. Some estimate that the tanker holding of 28,000 liters of water can earn over 1 million in a few days in areas of the province where municipal trucks have not visited. So there are some serious problems with water mafias that are affecting the economy. And I mentioned a few comments and raised a few questions before the news break. I want to bring you in, Sam, just to really comment if you've noted some of the questions I've raised. Then we can talk about the water mafia before we go into some relief that residents will be getting in the eThekwini. Go for it, Sam.
Can I, before the news break, I wanted to respond. So I'm going to do a 3-fold response, right? I want to respond to some of the comments that Hassan made, but let me start with this. In the Oval Office today, Elon Musk was there. Elon Musk. Elon Musk has one of his projects, apart from Tesla, apart from AI, is the biggest benefactor of AI in the world right now. Biggest. 99%. One of his projects is Starlink. He's looking Ramaphosa in the face. Ramaphosa has ownership of MTN.
Together with his brother-in-law.
Together with all his cronies. MTN is one of the, in terms of comparatively between MTN and Vodacom and Cell C, MTN has got the biggest slice in terms of value, in terms of turnover. The reason why they don't want Starlink, it's got nothing to do with BE. So let's just take that myth and let's just wash it away. It's nothing to do with BE. It's to do with thuggery. Because if another competitor comes in, anybody who studied economics will tell you, more competition, in other words, more supply, what happens to price? Price drops. So why do you block people? Because you want to keep the price up so that ordinary people like you and I have to pay higher data rates, higher cell phone rates, etc., etc., etc. So I just needed to clarify that if it was me, I'd be embarrassed. You've got to have the audacity to sit there and not want other people and come up with this whole theory of triple B. It's got nothing to do with triple B. But anyway, I just wanted to put that as a point of clarification. Secondly, the issue of political donor funding. If you look at the Electoral Act and you look at the what they call the Public Funding Act of South Africa, it's as weak as they come. It says any donation over 100,000 must be declared. You can give 100,000 donations, you don't need to declare it. Okay? And that's what's happening at the moment, firstly. Secondly, you know, I know that in this country, I think our fiscus revenue collection is about 1.6 trillion, correct? informal market supply, informal money supply, informally, including hawala money, is over 2 trillion. Okay? That's where government is not focusing on. We have got such a big undercover, informal money supply. It's got more money than this government can ever dream of. And I'll give you an example. In the Northwest, we have a, what do they call this? Where you, City Deep, where we bring in stuff out of Rustenburg and stuff. Most of the chrome, coal, and minerals coming into City Deep are all illegal mining. All illegal mining. Most. No control. Why? Because the guys in the Department of Minerals and Energy are all under control. So you want to talk about political party funding. That's one of them. And they're funded primarily by the Chinese, funded primarily by the Indians from India. That is what is keeping these political parties alive, the big ones. With regards to where the DA gets its money from, everybody knows that George Soros is one of the biggest contributors of the Open Society Foundation. If you look at the constitution of the DA, they're very strong proponents of open society. That's an ethos which comes out of George Soros. George Soros is a Hungarian Jew, and he's sort of persona non grata in America at the moment because he's been one of Donald Trump's biggest nemesis. With regards to the IFP, I think Ernest and I spoke about it. They get fringe funding, hedge funding. So funders would, to keep peace because they got business in KZN, they'd fund the IFP because the IFP is a bit more, they're not conservative, they're more traditionalist. So they have what we call a Zulu tribal ethnic ethos. PA, I think, is a completely different mechanic on its own. It's funded by Rob Hersov and his cronies. But what does a funder want? An EFF, we all know the history of the EFF is illicit cigarettes. I mean, that's what's been in the media for the last 10 years. So, I mean, I know the guys will want to attack me for that, but that's what's in the media. And that's now been dried up because of cigarettes coming out of Zimbabwe and so forth.
But who was funding them from the illegal cigarette trade?
There was this, Mazotti. But let's not go far. I mean, MK Edward Zuma had some connections here in Pietermaritzburg making cigarettes. And that was also shut down by SARS. So the point is that, and I think Hassan raised it, we spend a lot of time on administrative minimization, administrative controls. We don't spend time dealing with real live issues. Water mafia is one of them. Road mafias, which we haven't spoke about, is another one of them. When we talk about 1 trillion rand, everybody gets excited about spending 1 trillion rand. Of the 1 trillion rand, I can tell you now, it'll end up as 1.2 trillion. It'll end up as 1.6, like Mabhida Stadium. Mabhida Stadium and King Shaka started with X and multiplied 4 times because of corruption, because of backhanders, and backhanders are primarily business. Okay? It's not the man in the street. It's all the businessmen. It's the Indian businessmen, it's the African businessmen, and you've seen ABB, the ESCOM deals. We've seen some of the big American companies. We've seen the German companies. Everybody thinks corruption and sort of rogue tenderpreneurs are primarily these guys who walk around with guns, and everybody perceives that a mafia has always got a gun in his back pocket. A mafia has got a white collar and a tie, right? That's where the corruption is. We know where the corruption is in this city. I can tell, I was telling Ernest now, in 2021 election, I came straight from ICC. You and I had an interview. The ANC was on the way out. You were there, Ernest.
Yeah.
They were on the way out. How do they get back in? I'll tell you. Corruption. Who funded them? Guys in the inner city, Grey Street, right? Brown envelopes, small political parties. Those are the issues. Here's the rub. Here's the rub. Who puts these people in power? You and I. Where must change occur? Doesn't it occur in administration? It occurs with you. What you need to do. Remove them. How do you remove them? At the ballot box, right? The third issue and the final issue with VAT. With VAT. The ANC is still got its 2% VAT. You know, creative accounting, any fool will tell you who's been to school that all you do is you change the dynamic and make it look a bit better and do a different presentation, but the end result's still the same. The end result is you got your tax, right? And the tax is that diesel costs, forget about sin tax, diesel costs are going to affect eggs, taxi fare, bus fare, rail fare, food fare, right? That's where the issue is. And it's not a pro-poor tax regime budget. It's a pro-business, pro-oligarchy, pro-multinationals, pro-capitalist budget. And that is where voters need to say, it's not a political rhetoric, it's fact. Voters need to say, how do we change that trajectory? Vote these people out, the whole lot. This government has failed dismally, starting from the ANC to the DA to the PA to the whole lot. Because I said earlier, and I said to Ernest, the DA would have done exceptionally well if they were still in opposition. We wouldn't see this nonsense.
Some important comments, and we're not going into elections now, Sam, so we'll discuss that a little bit later. I want to get back to Ernest. Ernest, at 20 municipalities, plumbing contracts 800 million annual expenditure.
Yeah.
They're actually reviewing the policy now on plumbers after spending 800 million per annum on hiring contractors.
Yes.
And indications are that on Tuesday, EXCO met. And basically, they're looking at creating separate management entity for the EWS with a water turnaround strategy to resolve the water supply problems and revenue loss the city is experiencing. Among the issues raised by residents and councillors were incompetent plumbers, recurring pipe leaks, delays in repair time, and unserviced roads. Now, this particular problem, has led to these so-called mafias getting involved. Now, to deal with non-revenue water, which is a serious problem, the EWS will ensure pressure management, restricted installation, pipe replacement, pipe repairs, leak detection and repairs, reservoir and metering, and smart metering. So they say as of May 14th, which is a week or so ago, 154 bursts were in the system, with 52 received, in the morning, opening leaks in the system, etc. The municipality intends to install 88,972 restrictors to really control the use of water. But an important aspect that has been raised is that the frequent mains bursts are also contributing to water losses and disruptions. Now, concerns were raised when the mayor presented the budget roadshows, and they basically said that these incompetent plumbers that have been employed by the municipality, and it's costing 800 million, are causing these problems. So they're looking at a strategy to create in-house plumbing services to be more effective. And they indicated that all vacant positions will be filled so that there's accountability to a particular department and a section head in terms of delivery. So They want to minimize external contractors, like how they have the water mafia, and they want to minimize the use of tractors for water disruptions, etc. That's the first question I want to raise with you, that how has that gone down by council? Secondly, Etiquette Council has approved a 50% debt write-off, and you indicated in a program, a few programs ago, that the ability for the city to collect its outstanding debt is a huge problem. And that is going into billions of rands. So in an endeavor to get people to start paying, as of 31st January 2025, whatever that's accumulated, water, electricity rates, etc., the city is prepared to write off, not necessarily in any income levels, with everybody 50% in condition the balance you pay off, or you pay it within a period of 6 months.
Yeah.
And this relief is available until the 30th June.
Yes.
So I want you to answer the first question, Ernest, is the issue of addressing this water problem, the 800 million a year, and the strategy the city has. And secondly, the impact of this 50% write-off, and some details on how our listeners out there can deal and get access to the write-off.
So I think I'm going to answer it back to front, and rather the 50%, because listeners obviously who have some sort of accumulated debt would want to hear about that first.
Right.
So in essence, what the whole aim of the program is to obviously assist with this bulk of debt that's outstanding, because the reality of this situation is the city owes 32 billion. They owed 32 billion, which they are battling to get in. Is in essence how the municipality is framing it is that you come up with 50% of the value of your debt, and we will write the 50% off. That's electricity, water, lights, rates and taxes, or whatever is accumulated. And obviously that you would have to go to your local Sacoor Centre, or go to Martin West, or what's it now called, Florence Keys building, and which is in the central node. Obviously you need to have the documents to be able to prove that you are in the capacity to do it. But the one thing I would advise any person to do out there, resident, homeowner, whoever's got this debt, and remember this also applies to the municipal housing structures as well, like your municipal flats and the like, where I know I think there was a collection where there was only about 8% of the total number of people paying. However, there have been concerns raised, like by some residents saying, well, if I owe 100,000 or 200,000 or $1 million, where do I come up with 500 or half, 500,000 or 50,000? The reality is this is one of those situations the municipality is saying, come up with half of it, beg, borrow. I'm not going to say steal because that would be wrong. But the reality is come up with the money somehow, and we will, and make sure that you've got either a guaranteed letter by the bank or the like, and then we'll facilitate the arrangement.
So what if the 1 million is an incorrect reading?
Correct.
Yeah, well, that's the other fact. I mean, we sat with the officials last week, and I mean, okay, we sit in a caucus of about 59, 60 councillors, whichever it is, and we went at the officials and we said, okay, do you have the capacity to deal with it? What about the backlog of disputes that are sitting, the account disputes that are sitting with your department? You can't even, get that down. What about the 5 kiloliter reading that's a constantly benchmark figure, because now it's consistently changing. So, how, and all of that would be, and the answer was, well, that will all be taken into consideration. So, yeah, I mean, I'm encouraging residents to do it, but
they have the competency to do it.
No.
What competency? Right. No, sorry, that's me being nasty. No, well, listen, not everybody in the municipality is a rogue, and not everybody is incompetent. Let's be fair and give those people.
But the bills are recording these high charges.
Yes.
And many people are saying that my average bill is about 7,000.
Yes.
I'm sitting a bill of 35,000. And why do you want me to pay 17.5 when there's been incorrect water and electricity readings?
And
those estimates are far too high, because if there's, for example, a meter reader for water has not read your meter and he guessed it, and you're being charged, instead of your 40 kiloliters, 140 kiloliters, And if he doesn't read it, then your estimates are being worked on 140.
For sure.
And you're being charged 3 times the amount. And come 31st January, you got a 6 months overcharge and you're sitting with 40,000.
For sure.
And so obviously they're going to work out a strategy to say, let's park off your debt.
Yeah.
You will qualify as long as you came forward.
With the 50%. With the 50%.
Well, the 50% must be on what is your normal readings should have been and what is your estimated debt.
But that's why I'm going to jump in there quickly. I'm sorry to do that, but that is where us as socially responsible citizens also need to be able to say, listen, George, who's sitting behind the counter, or Mary, whatever it is, I have recorded my readings. Because let's be honest, I wouldn't trust the municipality readers to come out if you paid me to. I'm sorry, I wouldn't believe them, because the reality is the municipality has an obligation to read your meters. They're not always going to come to your house to read it. So what they do is they use that, and they're legally bound to read meters, but they rotate them around the city as it were.
You know what is the advice? It happened to me. I mean, I know how these readings work. It's the water meter.
Yes.
And my average reading was about 40 kiloliters a month. And I see it's 125 kiloliters. And
Yes.
2 or 3 months thereof, it was high. I took a reading of the current reading, and it was well below what they estimated.
Exactly.
3 times.
Exactly.
Send it to the water department, get them to correct it. They manually correct it, and then they record it in the system. And this is what our consumers need to do, both electricity and water, because if 20% of the readings are incorrect, then it's a huge problem. How this thing going to work?
Your bill is sitting with a 20% inaccuracy at that point.
And you cannot go there and pay 50% of something that you didn't use. So
Exactly.
they must meet with the councillor, go and meet with the officials of water or electricity, have that corrected, and they'll have to park that debt off.
Well, they have that's the thing. You'd have to be able to prove that your consumption is not what they say it is. Let me use an example quickly. I had a resident who, and unfortunately, the history of the situation is they had not recorded, taken a picture with a phone, a camera, whatever it is, over the last 6 months, because remember, they do historic comparison. And if you come to me and say, I have a problem with my bill, I'm going to lodge it with the official who says to you, okay, listen, I'm going to take a historic reading. The problem is once it reaches 3 months and you haven't picked up, you pick it up on your bill if you get your bill. That's the other thing, because most people still rely on the post, but
you get your bill 3 months late.
Well, yeah, well, exactly. But with the new service online, you're able to get it at the same time. But the reality is that's where we need to watch it and say, well, listen, the minute we pick up a problem, we raise it with the municipality, because if you come to me and say to me, let's say Sam comes to me and says, all right, well, I have a problem with the bill. I'm going to say, well, I need to see a historic comparison to be able to fight it. And I need to know what you have done in order to go. Did you raise it with the municipality? Did you at any time say, hey, chaps, I've got a problem here. You can't, I'm one person staying in the house, but you're charging me the use of an Olympic swimming pool. That doesn't work. So that's where the residents need to meet halfway. But I think in essence, that's where this 50% and that's where whether this program is going to be extended or not past the new financial year is another question. But the reality of it is, if you come down and say, listen, I owe 50,000, but it's in dispute. Remember, if you've entered into a payment arrangement and whatever it is, you're paying off your 300,000. And I've just had another resident come this morning to me and saying, we've paid off 500 or 300,000 somewhere in the region, and we've paid off 6,000 extra every month for the last 5 years because and now this type of program is coming up, and they only owe like probably maybe 10,000 rand, then you would still qualify. But remember, it's applicable across all sectors. But that's where the residents need to decide what they're going to do.
What the residents need to understand, and I'm wearing my municipal cap 7 years later, and your DA councillors must listen.
Yes.
The issue is simple. You call it, if they remember the terminology now, is you trap the account.
Yes.
You trap the account and you manually adjust.
Yes.
Now, if there's an over reading of the electricity account and you've got proof, pay your meter, you've got pictures, that your current reading is way below what they estimated, you go to Jeff Taylor Road, to the electricity department, and get the meter reading section to correct, because the billing section in Treasury, they just bill.
Just remember,
same with the water department.
The corrections with finance now, eh? That is no longer with the department, so it's all with finance.
No, finance does the billing.
Yes.
But they don't do the correction of the meter readings.
Yes.
The electricity department does the corrections because they've got sections
And water.
department. And if those departments are not timeously advised, they've got clerks that manually correct
And then
these
they have to
things.
submit
and
it,
then they punch it into the system, and Treasury picks it up, and they do a credit in the account.
Yes,
But
yes.
it takes 3 months to get that sorted out. Now,
At least,
with the
at least.
response to this write-off, and the pertinent dates, as you mentioned, is your arrears as of 31st January 2025. And if in that particular bill there's an excessive or, and a water account or electricity account was because of wrong meter readings, that account needs to be trapped, corrected timelessly, and before the end of June, an adjustment made so that the necessary 50% can be executed, and then the balance can be payable over a period of 6 months if you don't have the cash up front. But there are a couple of other challenges that would come up. Because some people would not have paid as of 31st January. But to avoid disconnection, they may have paid it at 30th April. Now, obviously, their current bill will not be the same as 31st January because they've already paid. Whether it applies to those guys, I think the answer is no, because they would have paid it. They wouldn't get a retrospective credit.
Well, yes and no, because remember, you still incur charges accordingly. So
I'm saying this is what, through people's naivety, the municipalities will cash in with. For example, if you owed 50,000 as of 31st January 2025, of which 40,000 was arrears. So of that total debt, which includes current, you should have had a write-off of 25. But to avert a write-off, as at the end of April, you were told that the guys that disconnect electricity are on the road, that you must pay your arrears. So you paid your 40,000, so you ended off with your current. So you will lose off.
But that's why it has to be consistently monitored by the resident as well. But the one thing I am going to caution against is, it goes back to your question of capacity and whether it will be processed accordingly, because I have a sneaky suspicion that the capacity issue is going to come into effect, and there will be people who fall through the cracks. I suspect there will be.
You see, whoever formulated this policy just chose a date as of 31st January. They didn't consider current circumstances. And I know when policies were formulated back in the day, when we talk about qualification of illegal occupants in housing projects and whether they qualify to be regularized and given the house, cut-off dates were set and it created chaos. You got to work until the current date. And if they said as at 31st May, if your debt is X amount, then people obviously will look at the current debt. And 31st January is an ambiguity. And as councillors, you guys need to clear that, because people are going to come there and we're dealing with 60% of naive residents. They're not educated, and many of them are pensioners and grantees. And they are the people that have been messed up with this incorrect meter readings. And because they don't read the bills and their families assist them, etc., that they become victims of circumstances. So councillors in those areas need to work with these people. But anyway, that's a process, and I'm sure councillors know how it works. The cut-off date or the write-off is as of 31st January, your debt or your arrears plus the current debt. February, March, April, May, you'll have to pay those current debts. But if there's an overcharge of an incorrect meter reading, then it must be corrected, because you can't sign an ATP to pay those debts over 6 months, only to find that those are overcharged as well. Because the intention of this is to give relief to those people that cannot afford to pay.
For sure.
Going forward, the high electricity tariffs, water tariffs hasn't been addressed. And that's what Sam has been saying, that people cannot afford to pay. And our economists were saying that what relief is bringing. But we've got about 7 minutes left, Ernest. And I just want you to quickly talk about the 800 million expenditure. And do you think that council has taken a correct decision to appoint or to look at filling vacancies for in-house plumbers, or they equally as bad, or what is the situation?
Okay, so there's with whatever knife you have, you're gonna cut both sides. So there's been a push to say from residents to us through to the council to say, listen, we pay rates and taxes. We need a competent workforce of people, because of plumbers, technicians, the reality, or the rest of them. Because if you look at it as it is, council itself, in its entire operation, the municipal, whether it's government nationally or a local municipality, they are costs. They are costs. They're not generating money. They are service providers to the people who pay rates and taxes. And they don't generate money. Well, they should, but I mean, that's another debate for another day. But the reality of it is this 800 million spurred because of that conversation. Because how often have you had people come up and say, oh, well, I've had a plumber come here. They went and sat in their vehicle. They did nothing. And then the next shift comes. And the council incurs unnecessary cost because of people who are either too lazy, incompetent, or both. And I'm going to be quite honest about that. The amount of plumbers that I've spoken to, and it ties into what Sam said earlier about minorities also, that pushback, because a lot of the people that I speak to, the plumbers are people of color. There are very few that are white people. And the reason I'm saying that is when the engagement happens, there is a lot of tension between those sects of plumbers, whether it's an Indian guy and a black guy, whatever it is, there is a perceived bias that the person who's doing the schedule, the roster, whatever it is busy signing up for his cronies that are not fully competent and qualified and do not have the tools. But with my engagements with the senior management of EWS, I laid it into them thick, because I said to them, guys, how are you assessing these people? How are you vetting them, crediting them? Where is your fundamental oversight as the department to say, does Ernest's plumbing company, which I don't have, by the way, I'm just making sure everybody knows, but where is Ernest's plumbing company, which is contracted to the municipality, does he have the tools? Has anybody checked that? Does he has backup of those tools? Do we have the necessary competence? Has that been assessed? Does this person actually know the difference between a 125% and 600? Does he have the knowledge of the relative collars? All of these things were raised with him. The issue of in-house capacity has been raised through the union meetings that I've sat in on a number of times. And many times I've directed the department in those meetings that I chair that to say, listen, how are you managing your resources in the department? Because people are a resource, just as well as your spades, your picks and everything. How are you effectively managing your resource to be as productive as possible? Because the fundamental complaint from the workforce, from the labor itself, is saying, well, as an example, we don't get winter jackets, and how the hell do you expect us to go and work in Worthers Hill where it gets cold? And how do you expect us to go and repair pipes when you can't even keep us warm? And that's an ongoing argument. There's also issues around small plant. There's also issues around overtime. Now, the overtime, and it's a popular debate to say, oh, well, the plumbing guys want to, they only come on weekends because they want overtime. And that also speaks to issues I've raised with the department to say, are you as a department actually...
So the perception that in-house services, plumbing, electrical, may not necessarily be the solution, although they envisage a big saving, because obviously these contractors that are outsourced are charging a heck of a lot, not giving value for money. So time will prove whether it's working in condition that they qualified and there's somebody assessing them and they're held accountable. They got the necessary tools to
and knowledge. You see, the fundamental part that goes back to is to say it's well and good that we have plumbers that we're outsourcing to. The aim, and this is what I've been personally pushing for, is to say, guys, we need to cut on our cost out there, but with the people that we're not paying, the lack of contractors that may have the institutional knowledge, we also need to fully capacitate the people who are in our own departments. We cannot just have people who don't know what they're doing. And that's what's been put, because your accountability measures need to be put into effect. And that is essentially what we're driving. It's cost cutting while in making sure that our own workforce is suitably qualified. That's what we need to do.
So in-house versus outsourcing. Listen, I want to bring you in as your final comments. We're running out of time. I know your side is 1-0 down by an own goal, and you've got 45 minutes to see whether you can muster some kind of a trophy, maybe a challenge. I want to give you time to go and watch the second half later. Your final comments, Hassan.
Sure. I think just one thing I didn't highlight in terms of the budget as well. Look, I think there was still some relief in terms of the social grants. Social grants were increased by more than inflation. So, for example, pensioners out there, your monthly is around 2,185. That's increased now to 2,315 rands. So at least there is some relief in terms of social and child.
Is another question.
That's the other question. But the fact is that
extra pocket of potatoes.
Sure. So at least there is some slightly more than inflation, which is better. At the same time, inflation numbers came out today lower than expected, came in at about 2.8% year on year. So inflation has eased over the course of the last 6 to 9 months or so, which sort of sets the stage for hopefully interest rates coming down. We hope, but we do have a Reserve Bank governor that's very, very hawkish and tends to be very, very not very flexible in terms of cutting rates. But if we see some consistency in terms of inflation over the next 2-3 months, there's a possibility of getting a rate cut, which means more relief for those that are, indebted. And at the same time, it provides some stability and allows for business and the like to invest and to improve in terms of the economy. So while there wasn't great news in terms of the budget, it's more a case of, as Sam highlighted, not taking from here and giving there in terms of from a taxes perspective. But nonetheless, I think hopefully we will see some easing off in terms of, as inflation eases off, in terms of hopefully cost of funding eases off over the next 6 months. It sort of lays a platform for some improvement in terms of economic growth, and that I think gives us hopefully some optimism for the year ahead.
Yeah.
Thanks, Hassan. There is some positive sentiment, and no doubt by the rand coming below 18 rand, and markets are moving up. A lot of stimulation for the economy, and we're hoping in the next couple of weeks we'll see the outcomes of the positive sentiment. Sam, your closing comments. You have 2 minutes.
Can I just say, you asked a question about the 800 million with the eThekwini municipality. I come from a technical background. One of the things anybody who comes from a technical background should understands and knows. You learn it. You learn in business school. You learn it all over the world. It's called benchmarking.
Yeah.
Right? I see these plumbers and these road diggers and these pavement diggers. They dig. They leave all the junk on the side of the road. Now, there's no...
I thought you were going to say they dig and make a mess, and
they do make a mess. They make a mess. It's a mess.
They don't even get the job done properly.
You're busting potholes every day.
So you dig, you create a bigger mess and leave, and you create problems for other departments.
They do it, I'm assuming, although I know I'm correct, to create employment. So you bust your tire, you go and create employment. You bust wheel joints, you create employment. I'm saying to Ernest, if you're the chairman of that particular committee, why isn't a eThekwini department or any other metro having they used to have it in the old government. Now, everybody says, yeah, but the white government, this white government, that. You got to take the good from the bad. There's not everything the white government did that was rubbish. One of the things they did do good was that training colleges.
Yep.
They had apprenticeships. That skills technical colleges called technicons. Now we have TVETs. And what's coming out, with no disrespect, they can't even, I can do a job better than most of them.
They can't even drill.
So what I'm saying to Ernest, challenge that. If you want to spend 800 million or save 800 million, empower these people so that they can have more skill.
Exactly.
Where the skill
exactly is a good test, so that people come out, they pass an exam to perform on the ground.
I learned a very simple thing in life. If you want to be a good artisan, clean around you.
Yeah.
You can never be a good artisan if you can't
leave
even
things in a mess.
You leave things. You don't tar. There's trenches. It's crazy.
And carry the right tools also.
That's where it starts. And I'm saying to Councillor Smith, even if they don't listen to you, hammer it, because sometimes somebody's going to have to listen. Throwing money at in-house employment, this and that, that's all Mickey Mouse stuff. We want to see real stuff on the ground. How do you think pensioners feel going down to Spa, you're hitting potholes, you're busting tires every day.
And by walking, they trip over all this debris, they get injured, and there's a bigger problem.
It's exactly, if you're doing that and you're failing in that regard, how do you think you're failing in the billing system?
Well,
That's
listen,
the
again,
Complete
you
mess.
know,
It's a complete mess. That,
again, when it comes to policy formulation, you got to make sure you take into account all the different dimensions related to the policy. This is why the question that I've raised,
for sure,
many of them may not have been answered by the CFO and his department, because a lot of them don't even think about these things. As Sam mentioned in previous, they just come to work 8 o'clock morning, they disappear for the day, they're back at 4. The city manager talks a whole lot of things, and he wakes up suddenly election time just to please his colleagues out there.
which is wrong.
So-
which is wrong. Because
Definitely.
it's for service delivery for the people. That's
So
what
Ernest,
it should be.
just a point to conclude, the GNU has been, extended to municipalities in the form of municipality of national unity in whatever form, because the province, the provincial of national unity is controlling the municipalities. Obviously, whether they listen or not is another question. But I think it's important that people must see value for money and improvement in service delivery.
Agreed.
Because these people are helpless, and a lot of them are paying for their services and want to pay for their services.
Yeah.
So as we go along, we're going to chat more about this, but we're going to have to engage with heads of departments, because a lot of my listeners are asking me, can we see improvements on the way forward? In which way we can hold government accountable, like what Trump was saying.
Sure.
That, I heard about this genocide, and he sees Malema shouting, kill the Boer and what have you. And then he finds that BE is predominantly 99% black. And as Sam is saying, incompetency. There's nothing no problem with black economic empowerment in condition you have the correct personnel to do the work. Colleagues, this has brought us to the end of News in Focus. We ran out more than 10 minutes. Hassan is worried that his boys are still playing, and he's hoping they can make the equalizer and
one thing.
and achieve something in the year. We leave that for another occasion. On a closing note, I'd like to thank our guests this evening. I think you've done a wonderful job on a very difficult subject, but we've analyzed it as best as we could. The budget 3.0. We also analyzed the write-off. I think Ernest has given us some indications there, and we went through the presidential working visit to USA. You wanted to make a comment before we close, Ernest?
Quickly.
Yes,
And people don't like it when I say quickly, because I'm generally not. I just want to, for any residents who want to do that process, you asked me the question, how do we keep government accountable? We need to ensure we know how we're spending, what we are spending through the billing, that we are submitting it on time. And if you don't know how to do that, we need to sort that out. 2, if you're going to apply for the process, this 50% write-off, understand that whatever commitments you have made, whatever payment arrangements get written off during this process. That means your acknowledgement of debt, your 80/20s, the rest of it. And lastly, when it comes to this, please make sure you know who you're speaking to. Write down the details of who you spoke to, when you went to the department, what the security guard's name was, who you dealt with, whatever documentation you can have. Because the reality is, as I said, and this is what I was supposed to say earlier, and I apologize, was that whatever documentation you get, keep it, do not lose it. Because if you happen to be one of those individuals that fall through the cracks, you need to make sure that you know who you spoke to, when you spoke to them, as much information that arms us to be able to take the process forward. Because without that information, the same thing applies to billing. We are basically trying to fight with one hand tied up behind our back.
Well said, Ernest. I want to close with the comments made by both John Steenhuisen and Ernie Els today in the White House. They said, let's work together to rescue South Africa and make South Africa flourish once again. And obviously, the minorities are positive to work. And a lot of blacks are also positive to work together. We need to get rid of this mafia. We need to get rid of these tenderpreneurs and make sure that we deal with unemployment and bring it down from 33% to at least below 30% in the next couple of months. And in that way, create opportunities for our youngsters, because 35 and above, there's very little or no employment for them, including some of our doctors and professionals. So from an Islamic perspective, we're 9 days away from the month of Zulhajj. It is a very Mubarak month, and we have to make du'as that, number one, that the problem and the genocide that's taking place in Palestine, that the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes upon our people, and then, humanitarian aid comes back to Gaza. And Trump, in his, wisdom, must try to deal with Netanyahu in stopping the atrocities that are taking place there. And every effort must be made to ensure that this war stops there and humanitarian aid is brought into the country. Also, like India and Pakistan, Trump says he was influential in stopping a potential nuclear battle there. So likewise, throughout the world, we make du'as that Almighty Allah assists our people, ensuring that we live together. And a recipe for that is to obey Allah's commandments as shown to us by Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, to keep up with our ibadat, our salah. And we're reaching some very, very, auspicious months. So we have to pray and do whatever we can to assist, because like, humanity is suffering within South Africa, our Muslim brothers and sisters in the informal settlements are living in abject poverty. And in eThekwini alone, there's more than 200 informal settlements with more than 200,000 families living there. I think there's 600. And, those people are living in abject poverty, and we have to consider they don't even have proper water, sanitation facilities. So not only, other communities are suffering, it's also our black brothers and sisters. So we have to ensure that our leaders serve these people. So on that note, that brings us to the end of News in Focus for this evening. I'd like to thank our technician, Asif, for doing a sterling job this evening. He played some nice nasheeds. He'll continue to play a few of those nasheeds. And until next week, Wednesday, hopefully we'll discuss what's topical then. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Listen to News in Focus on Radio Al Ansar, Durban 90.4 and Pietermaritzburg 105.6 FM every Wednesday from 8 p.m. with Yunus Sacoor. That's 8 p.m. every Wednesday. Radio Al Ansar, keeping you informed.
Radio Al Ansar, 24/7, 365.
Welcome to Simplex Radio. Visit our showroom for the full range of car audio. Our TV department carries top brands with quality LED panels, full HD to Ultra HD, and now the experience of Super Ultra HD. Visit our theater rooms and transform your home with brands like Onkyo, Integra, Denon, Boston Acoustics, Yamaha, and more for quality audio visual experience. Now available, full range of home appliances. A one-stop shopping experience. Call 031-306-4029 or Kenilworth Park, 202 Brickfield Road, Overport. Simplex Radio, the name you can trust.
Sponsor an orphan, and you'll help support a vulnerable child to have the education they've always dreamed of, so they can build a brighter future. You'll be feeding a hungry stomach and a hungry mind with knowledge that will last them a lifetime. That's the power of an education. Sponsor an orphan now with Islamic Relief.
Plan your dream holiday with the specialist, World of Travel, as we pride ourselves in offering you the best in Hajj and Umrah. We also offer travel packages to the Middle East, Far East, and many more exotic destinations. Call our professional travel consultants now on 031 20 888 77 or view our website